Okay, guys, we are now live on the YouTube channel for our monthly show for Alabama Work Comp today. I want to welcome everybody. Of course, it's Bernard Nomberg and David Nomberg, Nomberg Law Firm in Birmingham, and we do this we try to come to you the last Thursday of each month, and we talk about whatever the headlines are telling us dealing with employers, employees, independent contractors, and all of the above when it comes to the national news, Alabama news. And we're so pleased to have our friend as a guest, Enrique Flores from Indiana. How you doing, Enrique?
I'm doing well, Bernard. Thank you, and thanks to David for having me on.
Absolutely. And
How are
Dave, how are
you?
you doing today? How's your world?
Doing fine. No COVID around me. COVID free right here, and just busy helping Alabama's injured workers. Things are good.
Well, that's always good. And guys, as we go along over the next almost hour that we'll be together, what we like to do is we run through some of the headlines that we've pulled out over this past month that talk about really because we're in the middle of the pandemic. Frankly, most of these stories are going to be COVID related and how they relate to people in the workplace. And we'll also get to our favorite topic, which we've covered the first 4 or 5 months, something to do with that good old gig economy. And of course, Uber and Lyft will rear their heads again, as they always do. It seems to be in just about every one of our episodes here. So I'm just so glad that we're here. And before we kick off and get into some of these articles, Enrique, if you would just tell us, David and I know about you, but we want you to introduce yourself and talk about your practice and where are you in the country and a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Bernard. Again, thank you both for having me on this. Well, I'm in Indiana. I'm based in Indianapolis, but I am originally from all over the place. Born in LA, grew up in Mexico, then went to El Paso, Texas, grew up in Texas after that, came to law school came to Indiana for law school and pretty much stayed here. So my first language is Spanish, which is why I stayed here. There was a big need for Spanish-speaking attorneys. And I would say probably 65% of my clients are Spanish-speaking only. Probably about half of those are undocumented. And it's where I like to concentrate a lot of my practice. What I do, of course, I do workers' compensation. And we all know that if you have workers' compensation cases, the volume takes over. More workers' comp cases than personal injury, which is my other practice. But so far, liking it in Indiana. There's still a big need. I don't know if I'll ever go back to Texas, but no, maybe one day. But Indiana's home for now.
Which part of Texas were you in, Enrique?
The Southwest. Grew up in El Paso and went to UTEP. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Well, I know Eastern Texas is about to get pounded by the hurricane, and that's just prayers and thoughts and lots of phone calls and texts to family and friends in that part of the country. One of our buddies is in Ponchatoula, Parker Larison, so we've been in contact with him, and so far they've been doing okay. But gosh, that part of the country just seems to get hit every single year at this time with those storms. But Enrique, I heard something else. I didn't realize. Now, David and I grew up in LA, but I don't know if it was the same LA. Dave, what do you think?
That's right. Yeah, LA, Enrique. In this part of the country is Lower Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's our version of LA.
You know, out of the other LA and that one, people probably look at me and they say, well, you know, the more likely one is Lower Alabama for you. No, it's actually the other one, Los Angeles, and but I was only there for maybe a year and a half. So I don't remember that part, but I still have a lot of family over there. And I used to go visit every summer. There's a direct line of buses that take maybe about 12 hours to get there from El Paso
Wow.
to California. So I used to take that every summer, stay a few weeks and visit family. So
Very good.
yeah.
Well, Enrique, we're now 5 or 6 months into the pandemic, and life as we know it obviously is forever changed, at least for now. Tomorrow it could be different. The next week it could be different.
Mhm.
But from that standpoint, we're all getting used to how life is, as well as how your law practice looks. We at times have had and still do have remote or telecommuting where we have support staff or even the lawyers may work from home and call in, and Zoom meetings obviously are the norm, or some version of that. Has your firm adapted, and are you guys doing any type of virtual law firm experience, or is everybody back in your firm? Or share with us a little bit about how your firm is still operating and handling its business for clients.
Sure. Well, I can tell you we're mostly virtual. I've had very little meetings with clients since the in-person meetings since the pandemic began, because Marion County, the county that is home to Indianapolis, was one of the last ones to even open partially from the Safe at Home proclamation. So that has helped. And now that more outdoor seating is available and everything, I'm able to do that. But I can tell you that we were fully set up to work from home. There's amazing technology that we've taken advantage of. I've updated my router once. I'm about to update it again.
Twice here.
Right. It just got all of a sudden after 9 months, it just got a little bit slower. So I'm like, okay, time to update. But really, my paralegal works from her home. I haven't seen her since then. I pick up the mail, scan it in, send it over. We look over it, and then we put it where it goes. Communications with clients, text, email, everything. And one of the things that helped is that we were trying to be as paperless as we could. So that helped a lot. But as you know, the bigger challenges are, for example, depositions. You prepare your clients. You want them to feel that they're supported. How do you do it virtually? How do you do it over the phone to where it's not casual, right? So I've had to give them instructions like, look, eat, prepare, dress as if you were going to go and be on a video or in person. And that has worked. The ones that I've had have been successful, even some mediation. So I don't know how it looks for you.
Well, David has learned he can't kick his client under the table anymore in a virtual deposition. But Dave, I know you've got a couple of court hearings tomorrow, and those are actually in person. What are you expecting to see?
I tell you, for the first time since March, I'm actually going to the courthouse for hearings. I'm not happy about it, but you know, when the judge tells you to come to court for the settlement hearings, then you go to court. And I know in Jefferson County here in Birmingham, I feel very safe there. I've gone there not for court, but for to go to some departments, county departments, and they've got the plexiglass up. They got hand sanitizer, signs everywhere. They've done a really good job at our courthouse. I'm going to Shelby County tomorrow, and I hope they've done a good job. And you know, I'll be masked up and have my hand sanitizer and keep my distance from people. And I would imagine that they've taken some very serious precautions there as well if they've opened back up to the public.
But you know, the good thing, guys, whether you're in Indiana or in Alabama, is we've been able to service our clients and help them and continue to meet the needs that they have. Because when you get hurt on the job, Enrique, I know you've counseled your clients many, many times that all of life's stresses ramp way up. And when you're not able to work and you're hurt and you can't bring in the money that you're used to for your family, everything else is affected and impacted. And that's going to lead us off. We're going to jump into some of our articles for this week. And we'll just start with this first one. It's COVID-19 and workers' comp, what current cases could mean for the industry. And it really is an overview of different lawsuits that have been filed in the last 4 or 5 months from different parts of the country. And there's one, let's see, there's one in Illinois. Oh gosh, where are they? Maybe there's a couple of them in Illinois, Pennsylvania, Chicago, and there's one against Amazon that is up in Staten Island.
I think that's a New York one.
Yeah. Enrique, did any of these particular lawsuits, we don't have to do deep dives into each of them. What I want to do is just be able to point out to people who may be watching our show that in different parts of the country, lawsuits are being initiated, but it's not just, I hate to use this term willy-nilly, they're not just filing a lawsuit just because someone has COVID-19 and they think they got it at work, because it's so difficult. There's no presumption, at least in Alabama, I doubt there's one in Indiana yet, that just because you got COVID-19 and you think you got it from someone at work, you still have to connect all those dots. And that's very, very difficult. Did any of these particular excerpts, these lawsuits, stand out to you, Enrique, that really we ought to be commenting on a little bit? Share a little bit.
Well, and this is just because this is one of the articles I saw early on that the Evans v. Walmart in Illinois. I remember seeing the headline for that when the family filed the lawsuit, and when I saw just the headline, it didn't say that there was a worker. So I clicked on it to see, like, well, maybe someone went in there and they contracted COVID and they know it was from there, right? But reading through it, it surprised me that it was a family of a Walmart worker. That was the allegation is that he contracted COVID in the course and scope of his employment with Walmart. So that really caught my eye, and it was one that I wanted to follow just to see what the court was going to say, because that has major implications for the workers' compensation system. Can you, so for example, in Indiana, it's an exclusive remedy. So you cannot go after an employer civilly, even in reckless negligence situations. So everything just falls within the workers' compensation system. So being neighbors, and I know Illinois is night and day to Indiana for just a very little that I know. I just know it's better. It just caught my eye because I just wanted to see the outcome. But of course, reading the other excerpts from the manufacturers associations in Illinois, when they filed a lawsuit for the amendment to the Workers' Compensation Act, that really brought it home for me. Like, oh, okay, well, the legislature finally moved to expand the coverage. So my thinking is that Evans is probably going to be dismissed, and now they're going to have to go within the workers' compensation system.
David, how would this case play out in Alabama if one was filed similar facts here?
Yeah, so similar to what Enrique said, if a worker is injured in Alabama, then his exclusive right or remedy against his employer is for workers' compensation benefits. So the three of us represent injured workers. And so what we're focused on is getting that injured worker his money that he's entitled to under the law, and medical benefits and reimbursement for mileage. And what the work comp system is, or the Work Comp Act in most every state, it's also a tort defense. It's a defense to tort. And so what that means is an injured worker or a worker that dies while working typically can't sue his employer for tort or negligence. So at its heart, work comp is a defense to tort. So I'm like you, Enrique. I'm I'm curious, how do you get around the work comp defense for an injured worker or a worker that dies at work? And I guess time will tell as a couple of these cases play out.
Right.
To answer your question a little more specifically, Bernard, I don't know that this case survives in Alabama, a suit against the employer for negligence or wantonness.
Let's say, guys, that instead of those counts, it's a count for work comp wrongful death or death benefits. In Indiana, Enrique, what type of expert opinion would you anticipate? And same for you, Dave. If you've got this case and you're trying to bring about such a case, a death case, in Alabama, we've got to have legal and medical causation. And that definition is probably very similar in most states. But let's just talk about the medical side of this. And we're just speculating. We're just playing. We're just trying to do a hypothetical, of course. Enrique, if you're putting this case on, if you're pursuing it, you got to have some medical connect the dots, so to speak. What would you anticipate needing? And again, I know I'm just kind of throwing it out there, but let's just kind of play that out for a second.
Sure. And as far as Indiana, as I was seeing that maybe 14 cases have 14 states have adopted rebuttable presumptions when it comes to COVID-19. Indiana is not one of them. And I don't know that we will see that. So I would have to have a medical expert tell me that the medical causation was more likely than not at work because of exposure at work. Now with that, and I can tell you because that's how I'm connecting the dots in a non-death case, COVID case that I have right now, where there was an outbreak at that facility and no one was wearing any PPE of any kind, no social distancing. So with that, that starts the first few links of the chain, right? Well, there was exposure, there was no social distancing. More likely than not, he contracted that there. So I would need that. I would need an actual doctor to be on the record and just tell us that, at least to give us a fighting chance. Without that presumption, the burden is on us as plaintiffs to prove that.
Dave, don't you see this as a battle of the experts, where you've got infectious disease doctors on both sides arguing with equal passion that yes, it was versus no, it wasn't?
That's right. And as Enrique, Indiana does not have the presumption, and neither does Alabama. And so that makes it much harder for these workers who've contracted COVID-19 to prove their cases. And as we'll see from the next few stories, without that presumption, so many of these claims are being denied and leaving people without medical care, without benefits while they're off work, and relying on the government or the generosity of people through GoFundMe pages, which is just sad that's what the state of these injured workers.
But it's the current reality, though.
Yeah.
Dave, before we move on to our next article, I want to scan to see if any of these other lawsuits really are, I'm not belittling any of them, but if there's anything of significant takeaways here, other than it's going to be just across the board, so very difficult, regardless of the type of case, it's going to be very difficult to prove that whatever or wherever you contracted the disease or the resulting conditions, permanent conditions afterward, came from work as opposed to anywhere else.
Well, the article concludes with this, and hopefully now that we're 6-7 months into this pandemic, hopefully now employers are following best practices. And that includes following public health guidelines, wearing masks, and social distancing for all employees. Hopefully employers are being smart and they're doing that. And if they do those things, that's going to help protect them from lawsuits from their employees. It's not a guarantee, but it's some of the small things they can do.
Enrique, has your firm put into place policies or procedures for visitors visiting the office, or have you not had any, and that is your policy?
Well, that is our policy for now. But even when I meet with clients, I always tell them, I always give them the option of going on video first. And they say, well, I have to give you these documents or whatever it is. So, well, let's meet somewhere outside and we'll wear masks. I'm just, and I always tell them, I said, look, I don't know if I have it and if I just don't show any symptoms. So I don't want to endanger you. So far, I've had no issues with that. So
that's good. Yeah. And Dave, share a little bit about our policies and procedures. We've had a few visitors to the office over the recent few weeks, not many, but sometimes it's necessary for us.
Yeah, we're doing our best to meet with people over the phone or through Zoom, but yeah, some people need to come in. And like you, Enrique, we're requiring masks to be worn. We've got hand sanitizer everywhere. We have temperature check before they come into the office.
That's
so
good.
Those are a few of the ways that we're protecting ourselves. We have two assistants who share an office, and they rotate days, so they're not in their office on the same day. And heck, even when I go in Bernard's office or he comes to mine, we wear masks.
And the first person to our office actually wipes down all common surfaces with disinfectant wipes that we have.
Good.
Well, guys, let's move on from this article and find us our next one. And this one comes out of Oregon. Frontline workers who contract COVID-19 want automatic work comp benefits. Employers say not so fast. And frankly, this seems to be the prevailing argument in every state and has been on different degrees. And we're going to get to Connecticut in a few minutes, being one of the I don't want to call it more liberal, but more open to dealing with this. But right now, Oregon says not so much. And Dave, I know it's a state that I want to visit sometime soon when things calm down, just because of how beautiful it is and not because of the civil unrest going on mainly in Portland right now. But take us to Oregon and the argument that's going on for this labor and delivery nurse.
Yeah, so back in March, Ms. Herring, who is a labor and delivery nurse at an Oregon hospital, she gets the symptoms of COVID-19, fever, nausea, headaches, shortness of breath, and she was out of work for a month. Her doctor advised her to file a work comp claim, and her claim was denied. She was told that she provided insufficient evidence, and her response to that was, how could I? No one was being tested then. This is back in March when I developed the symptoms, and testing wasn't really readily available back then. But it goes on to talk about this one particular insurer has denied 93% of COVID-19 claims to date. Just a really, really high number. And, like I said, she was off work for a month, so lost wages there. And this is a frontline worker. This is a person who elected officials, employers, they praise these people, and these are our heroes. And they contract COVID-19 through work, and what happens? Sorry, we're denying your claim.
Well, let me play devil's advocate. And Enrique, I'm going to throw this part to you. But there are other avenues for this nurse: health insurance, unemployment, sick accident or PTO, paid time off, the expanded FMLA under the CARES Act. There are other avenues. Why does it have to be through work comp?
Well, and I appreciate you throwing that to me, Bernard. Well, we have to go to the spirit of, at least for Indiana, and I suspect in many states, the spirit of the act is to provide treatment or some sort of benefit to a worker that is injured on the job, right, and get them back to work if possible. So the argument for me always is, look, this person provided a service. It is defined in our statute as an employee is basically someone that provides a service for the employer and they get paid for it. So she did what she was asked to do, and these are extraordinary times. It almost reminds me of the 9/11 first responders that were not given any coverage, and you have Jon Stewart passionately yelling at Congress, telling them, look, these people are heroes, and it's the same right now. Because I can tell you, we're talking about policies and procedures at our offices where I can refuse to not see people in person. You can provide a safe space for your employees and everything. But nurses, I mean, even grocery workers, they don't have that. They either work or don't eat. So I say it's the least that it could be provided. And with the few benefits that Indiana provides, I mean, it's probably even the cheapest way to do it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Now, David, if this case takes place in Connecticut, as our next to last article in our list, if this same labor and delivery nurse goes through this in Connecticut, would she be covered under what this new executive order from the Connecticut governor recently signed?
Yeah, and since we started talking about the pandemic, we've talked about the presumption, and what that means is it's just assumed that you acquired COVID-19 through your work, and therefore you're in a sense covered automatically by workers' compensation. It's just presumed that you contracted it through work, and therefore that allows you to receive money while you're off work as well as medical benefits. And these frontline workers like this nurse, we're asking them to go to work and take care of our sick. And that's why the presumption is so important. I think, Enrique, you said about 14 states have passed it, which is a very small percentage. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's making it so difficult for so many employees in all the many other states who don't have that presumption. But the presumption in some states covers healthcare workers. In some states, it'll cover first responders, and in some states, it'll cover essential workers, as you mentioned, grocery store clerks and delivery people.
Yeah, it's anybody who's on what they call the front line, and you may not think of it being someone in a grocery store, but my gosh, if you go into most grocery stores now, they'll have at minimum the thin plexiglass that's clear. You're standing on one side and you're putting your card in, and then the person ringing you up is on the other side. But all you have to do is step 1 foot to the right or to the left, and you're right there. It doesn't seem like it's far enough, at least in my grocery store in my neighborhood. It's only like about a 3 feet by 3 foot, very thin piece of plexiglass. Now, I will say this. All of the workers in my particular neighborhood grocery store are all masked up. Most of them even have on gloves. And I see 2 or 3 workers who I guess are considered bag boys or whatever, or stock guys. They're wiping down surfaces. They're wiping down the carts. And I appreciate all of that. But they're on the front line, just like nurses in ICUs, just like a firefighter responding to an issue.
Yeah.
All of these people, not just first responders, but I guess they now call them frontline workers. Gosh, there should be a presumption for these folks, because I bet if you look at the percent, I know there's been studies out there, there has to be a higher percentage of these people, these types of jobs, compared to maybe say what we do, are the higher percentage of cases.
And if I may add to that, Bernard, I like the Connecticut executive order, just because it gives, so for one, it shifts the burden to the employer. Come out and prove that you did everything that you were supposed to do. to prevent the spread, and then we'll see about your denial. But just to shut it down like that without without giving a fighting chance to the worker, that is cold, Bernard. It is really cold.
And unfortunately, it's the harsh reality of right now. But one of the things that just dawned on me, and the three of us have a ton of years of experience practicing law, but some of the people who may be watching this are not trained in the law. They don't do this and they're looking for answers. And we keep talking about the different states and the state laws. And a few minutes ago, I mentioned the CARES Act, which of course is not a state law, that's a federal law. So David, I want you to just, from a bird's eye view, when we're talking about Oregon or Illinois or Indiana, Alabama, what are we talking about for each state is just in general, as opposed to what some of these federal laws are meant to be dealing with in the pandemic?
Sure. So we're talking about 50 different states with 50 different laws, or each state has its own laws concerning workers' compensation. Indiana's work comp laws are unique to Indiana. Alabama's work comp laws are unique to Alabama. And so just because Connecticut enacts a presumption for essential workers that if they contract COVID-19, that they're covered under the Connecticut work comp laws, that doesn't mean anything in Alabama. And so that's why certain states have the presumption while others don't. Generally, each state has some similarities in that they will provide money for the injured worker while they are off work, medical benefits for the injured body parts, reimbursement on mileage when they go to the doctor, the pharmacy, or physical therapy, and then money or compensation if they have a permanent injury or a vocational disability. So that's generally what each state will provide in the form of a benefit. And as I mentioned before, the work comp acts for each state is a defense. It is a defense for employers because they can't be sued in tort or for negligence if one of their workers gets injured on the job. So if you're injured on the job, your only right or only ability to sue your employer is for workers' compensation. And then, of course, there's federal law, which is for federal employees or those workers who are injured on federal property. And that's a whole different set of laws that I'm not going to begin to even discuss today.
And then during this pandemic, some emergency amendments to current laws like the FMLA and so forth have been put into place and passed by Congress during the pandemic that gives extended leaves. It gives rights to workers to maybe receive certain limited amounts of compensation if they have to be off caring for young children or family members. I think it was the emergency FMLA and so forth. So it's very critical that if you're in a particular state, you seek legal advice and don't just Google it. Seek legal advice from an experienced attorney in your particular state. And Enrique Flores has joined us from Indiana, and this is our monthly Alabama Work Comp Today. And sometimes I think maybe we've mislabeled the show, but we're from Alabama. We know Alabama law. We bring on our friends from different parts of the country each month, and we talk about national issues. At the end of our show, we'll do a little comparison if we have time of Indiana procedures and laws dealing with work comp with Alabama's, which sometimes we can't get to just because we've taken up too much time on the other stuff. But I do want to welcome anybody who's watching this live. We've got a few folks. If you have comments or questions about any of these related topics, just put it in the comment section, chat section. I'll be able to see it. We'll be able to field it for you guys. Or even if you're watching this on replay, we'll still be able to see those comments. And Enrique, we're a little over halfway home now. We want to thank you for your time and your expertise thus far. And we've got a few more articles, but before we jump into that, we're going to take a side note on Big Ten and SEC football for like 90 seconds. As you know, David, if you look over David's shoulder, if you can't tell what those are, but it's all from Alabama games and big plays in the past. I know that
Right.
you're in the heart of basketball country. What's the general sentiment right now about football, basketball, or any sports that you're hearing?
Well, and thank you again for having me. I mean that this first half hour flew by, and I think we commented this before, but it's a very small group of people that are masochistic enough to go into workers' compensation, right? So this will tickle them. But I believe last thing I heard was that the sports were canceled, and they're considering going into the spring. So we were grateful for the restart in the NBA, where the Pacers were actually playing well, and Warren was dropping 50s and 30s out there, but then they get swept by Miami. So yeah, I think the Colts are going to have a much bigger draw if that continues on the schedule. But
Enrique, I got to pause you for a second because I want to
yeah.
tell David, Enrique's talking about NBA and NFL.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Enrique, we're in the heart
Wow.
of the Southeastern Conference, baby. We're 3 miles from the home office. And David, because we take college football so seriously around here, what's the current state of college football for our conference, at least as of today, when we're taping this on Thursday, August 27th?
Yeah, I guess we're about 4 weeks out from the kickoff of the SEC schedule. So, Enrique, because the Big Ten's not playing, you're welcome to cheer for our beloved Crimson Tide.
We can send you some Bama swag if you'd like. But I'll tell you how serious football is in Alabama and in the Deep South. The football championship series, there's Division I has 2 subsets. The FBS, that's the Power 5, that's the big schools. The FCS is North Dakota State and Central Arkansas and Austin Peay and those schools. Well, they kick off their season this Saturday night, not at Central Arkansas, not at Austin Peay, but rather in Montgomery, Alabama at the Crampton Bowl. That's how serious we take our football down here.
What? Are they going to keep them in a bubble? I thought that was genius by the NBA, going back to that. Everyone just in one place.
I've heard some talk. Well, you may know this, that for the NFL playoffs, they're thinking of putting the qualifying teams in a bubble. I don't know if that'll still, I'm surprised. Why didn't the NFL just buy an island or say to New Zealand, we'll pay you, couple $100 million. We'll just ship our whole organization out there. Anyway, let's get back on track. I could talk about this on another show, another time, as I frequently do. But Enrique, let's move into our next article. It's a national article that comes from NBC News. And the title is Some Workers Are Sickened by COVID-19. They Face Extra Challenge. And this is kind of the theme we're talking about today. And we've been talking about for many shows now is proving where they got it. What did you glean from this article? Anything of significance share with you there?
This one was tough to get through. It was absolutely well written. It wasn't that. It's just that it was a sad story, especially with the person that works for the county at the jail. I mean, how many stories and how many experts have you seen that places like a jail or nursing homes, those are tinder boxes. One little spark and it goes up in flames. So this worker gives a breakfast to an inmate who was coughing and showing symptoms of COVID. She contracts COVID, is extremely sick, and now that even suffering from the side effects of it. And David, you mentioned that people paying with GoFundMe and instead of benefits, she has that. And it was so sad to see that she took her case before the workers' compensation, board or commission in Ohio, and they sided with the county. So this goes back to the whole presumption issue and just look, presume that it was that, and let maybe take a look at the jail. If the jail is completely free of COVID, then you win your case.
Yeah, these cases, it's like Sisyphus trying to push that rock up the mountain over and over and over. But on a related note, one of the articles that I read but didn't put in here because it really just upsets me so much is that jails are letting out certain level of prisoners or presumed either they've gone through trial or they're waiting trial, but they're being let out. And there's at least one horrible story where an accused went and found the accuser and murdered her because right after being let out of jail. And that's because of the fear of the spread of the disease. And it's just, I know we're not going to be able to solve many of these issues here, but by talking about them, I think it continues to push the stories forward. It keeps the stories in the minds of people who maybe need to contact their senators, their congress people, those kind of things. And gosh, the other article that I didn't put in here, but certainly warrants us talking about, Enrique, we may have shared this with you before we went on the air. In Tuscaloosa, colleges are back in session. Schools around the country have all varying levels of in-person versus virtual or hybrids, but the kids are on campuses, and kids are going to be kids. And the first week that they were in Tuscaloosa, the amount of positive cases skyrocketed. So as a result, David, what did the Tuscaloosa mayor do in response to that?
So there was in response, it was a 2-week closure of bars in Tuscaloosa, as well as restaurants that had bars. They're doing everything they can to control it. I know that the university put in significant time over the summer to put in policies and procedures to protect the students upon their return, and lack of social distancing, lack of masks, lack of following the rules, and just the numbers exploded in the first week.
It would be in Tuscaloosa, or maybe the state of Alabama had more reported cases than the whole country of Canada earlier this week on a given day, which is crazy. And it would be too easy for us to delve into, well, the kids are being kids. That's not what our show's about here. What the focus I wanted to look at, Enrique, you had mentioned how businesses, restaurants are starting to open back up to a certain capacity in Indiana, or maybe in Indy itself. In Birmingham, I think we're limited to about 50% capacity. So what we've seen is a lot of restaurants become more creative. They're out on the sidewalks. And we know, David and I have some friends who have, one is a retail clothing store and the other friend has a restaurant, and usually their businesses are near each other. So the fellow who has the retail gives the sidewalk space to his friend who has the restaurant. And so it plays off each other so more people can be served that way. And it's out in the open air. And I don't know if you've seen that, but at least it's allowing more people to work. It's allowing more people to get out, socially distance, and get out of their homes, which I'm sure is maddening at times. So it's just, I know that there is this balance that sometimes becomes political, unfortunately, and spills over into social media, which sometimes you just have to turn that stuff off.
Right, and a lot of that has happened here in Indiana, where actually one of the streets near my building, they actually closed portions of the street to allow those restaurants to go out there and just operate there. For most of their patrons, because and I've seen that, yes, their restaurants are allowed to have people inside, but there are restaurants that will still not have any people eat there. It's just takeout only. They're taking it seriously, and I'm grateful for their workers, because then the less that they have to interact with so many unknowns. At least the co-workers, they know where they've been. They'll wear masks and take their precautions. But people coming from the outside, you just never know.
our downtown did the exact same thing this past weekend. I witnessed, I went downtown where they turned some of the major streets where some of the restaurants downtown are congregated, and they just turned it into strictly a pedestrian place with tables out in the middle of the streets. And I felt fine sitting outside. My tables were probably 10 feet from the next table. But David, are you going inside restaurants? Are you eating inside, going into bars or shops, those kind of things yet?
Trying not to eat in restaurants. We'll go to a restaurant and sit outside, or if it's an open air restaurant, I'm okay with that. Try not to sit in a restaurant. And I'm going to the grocery store. I was a little bit scared at first, but I've kind of got it over that. And we still do more delivery. We increased our supermarket deliveries and use of Amazon, of course. But
I was just getting ready to say, Enrique, do you and your family use any of the grocery delivery services or even meal delivery services in your area?
Yes, and I actually used it in the beginning, like David said, and it was scary. It was a lot of misinformation, no information going on out there. Yep. So I did use a lot of Instacart for a while, and then just as I started to see, for example, I don't want to give them free publicity, but I think Costco set the pace early on where they required masks. They were sanitizing everything. And so it was one of those, it is still one of the stores few stores that I go for shopping. So, and as far as delivery, it's the same. We've order a lot more from Amazon and online. So,
oh gosh, Amazon
no shopping
delivery has just exploded. But the reason why I bring up these type services is for many of the people who are actually doing the delivery, that's gig economy work. Mm-hmm. And that's such a vital importance of our economy. And that's going to lead us into our last article. That'll lead us into our last subject. When we started this a year ago, this was one of our main topics for a few months in a row, but now it's a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different due to the pandemic. And I know that, Enrique, you may have heard that recent couple of NPR segments about this. Dave, let's talk about Uber and Lyft and California's high stakes game of chicken.
Yeah. So for the first 6 months of this, we were doing this. It was all about gig economy, and then the last 6 months it's been all about the pandemic. So here we come back to talking about Uber and Lyft, specifically for the state of California. The California State Legislature passed a law, it's labor law known as AB 5. And the article says that this law tightened up the who could be hired as an independent contractor and who is to be classified as an employee. As a result of this law specific to California, Uber and Lyft, which is based in San Francisco, announced they would close their California operations after a court ordered them to reclassify their employees, ordered them to reclassify their drivers as employees. And what that means is employees that now they're subject to different taxes, they have to pay different benefits for them. And between that and the pandemic and less people working and less need for Uber and Lyft, they're saying we're just pulling up stakes and we're leaving the state of California.
And that's hundreds of thousands of workers that have not had any protections that you would as an employee. Enrique, when was the last time you used the services of an Uber or a Lyft or any of those type of services, similar to taxis?
New Year's night, yes. Yeah. And then after that, it calmed down for a little bit, but then pandemic hit and there was just no need. And it it always comes back to that, right? The fear, the unknown, and that you might get infected. But one of the things that I saw in the article, the spokesperson from California, Cherry, I believe is her name, she was talking about the benefits and the protections that an employee enjoys from a company. But now she was talking about safety, just safety from violent attack, safety from contracting COVID, with access to PPE, to sanitation, things like that that could help her. It also became I don't know that was such a big sticking point before the pandemic, but as the pandemic hit, it was one of those where, okay, well, yes, it would be nice to have health insurance and to have these benefits, but what about these other things? So now we have to buy our own protective gear, and we have to somehow shield ourselves. I've seen photos of Uber drivers that put themselves in a bubble, almost like bubble boy, trying to escape that, but still with the need to make money. So how do you balance that, right?
I've seen, not in this article, but I've seen video where Uber drivers or Lyft drivers are advertising themselves, however it is, whatever avenues they're allowed to, PPE on board,
Wow.
COVID safe, or whatever that they do, because they need their job. They need to keep driving, but they need the protections as well. But as I've said on all of these shows, these are heady topics, not ones that we're going to be able to solve today. But Enrique, I want to thank you so very much for spending some time with us, sharing your expertise. We're not going to get to the Alabama and Indiana comparison. We kind of did that a little bit as we went through this. But thank you, sir, for spending some time with us. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, and I cannot thank you both enough for this space and for inviting me, for considering me for this. I saw that you do have some views on the other videos, so hopefully mine is not going to be that one where it has negative views or just gets you canceled, if that's possible.
Well, if it helps you to know, our mom is watching right now. So we at least have that going for us all.
Between the Flores family and the Nomberg family, we're going to get 5 to 10 views. All right.
Strong. Well, Dave, tell us, we've got a new show, not related to this one, but you're going to be the front and center next Friday, September 3rd on Facebook Live. So tell us a little bit about that show.
Yeah, you said September 3rd, but I think it's September 4th.
Thank you. It is Friday.
Yeah.
First Friday.
Yes. Yeah. So Friday, September 4th, Bernard is leaving the office. He's going for a hike, and I get to take over the firm's Facebook channel. I'm going on Facebook Live at noon Central Time on September the 4th, which is a Friday, and I'm going to spend about 30 minutes answering your questions about workers' compensation. So if you have questions, you want to know about medical benefits or what your rights are, hope you'll tune in. Send me your questions on Facebook Live, where it's at Nomberg Law Firm on Facebook. And we're just going to talk work comp, a little question and answer session. It'll be the first time we're doing it. And I think the following month we'll have Steve Altman come on and talk about bankruptcy. Steve's been handling bankruptcy matters for 25 plus years in Alabama, representing businesses and debtors. And so next month the following month in October, Steve will do the same thing I'm doing, but we'll talk about bankruptcy. So join us September 4th at 12 Central on our Facebook page.
Yeah, we're going to try and rotate topics each month when we do this. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes for us, Dave, there. And then the concluding, I'll say our next Alabama Work Comp Today in September will be on the 24th. We're going to have Nebraska attorney John Rame with us. John's been a longtime friend. We've done business with him. His family firm, much like our family firm, has been doing business in their state, representing injured workers for many, many years. And I'm looking forward to that. Who knows if we're going to be talking about these exact same topics, or maybe some new things are going to come up. But I want to thank you again, Enrique, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, likewise. Thank you very much. And thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. We're going to keep doing it as long as David will continue to be on camera. We'll keep doing this. Guys, have a safe week, safe month. Even if you don't like to wear a mask for yourself, please, please wear it for fellow mankind. Hope you guys do well. Be safe.